All right, so I haven't been slacking off. I've actually been working. Uh, Let me show you a little bit of what I've been working on here. So this here is a torque tube. As you can see, it's nice and shiny. That's because I've spent the last week grinding on this thing and welding up any of the deep pitting that was on it. It's rusty, right? I was 80 years old, so it's rusty. It's definitely solid. I did some non-destructive testing, NDT, to find out and to make sure that I wasn't going too deep or anything like that. So this is ready to go now, as are, well, almost, I guess, the rear radius rods. They're not quite ready to go. If you look down here, I haven't gotten those quite cleaned out yet. You can see that right in here. And I got my air compressor back, so now I can hook up the die grinder and get that stuff cleaned out, and those will be ready to rock and ready to go to powder coater. But that's not the big project for today. The big project for today is we're starting on the Columbia 2-speed. So this is out of a later, or this is a later model Columbia. And it's got frame horns on it. It's a little wider than my original axle. That's my original axle, right? 35. And this Columbia here is a little bit wider than the original. Not significantly, about an inch. But these frame horns here, as you can see, this one here is rotted off. That's because it was sitting under a house in Tennessee for the last 30 years or so. Pinion side up, which is nice. But the downside is that put the frame horns in the dirt. So this one's rusted off, and this one is just rusty. Probably salvageable, to be honest with you, but rusty. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut those off. I don't need them for the way that I'm going to set this thing up, because I'm going to set it up with the rear radius rods, and as I just showed you, that has spring mounts right here. So we're going to go ahead and tear this thing apart and then clean it up, and then I've got to weld on some brackets, because as you can see, these brackets here are where the rear radius rods mount to, and I'm missing those because that's not how this one works. So we're going to work on that real fast. I think it's not real fast, but we're going to work on that and see what happens. So we cut those off. There they are. They're kind of hot. Not going to touch them. And that's what the current product looks like. And we're going to grind that down a little bit and make it all smooth so you don't even notice that it's there. That's the plan. So I'm going to get to work on that and keep you updated. All right, we're back in the garage today. Yesterday I managed to get a few things set up, and today I am working on making a template for my rear brackets. And I'm gonna make it out of cardboard first. What I got here is the rear radius rod, a piece of cardboard, some tape measures, and a marker. So I'm going to figure out how it's going to look, figure out how it's going to work on the axle, cut it out of cardboard with a razor knife, and then put this, whatever comes out of this, on that. Alright, I encountered a problem right here. So this axle tube is larger in diameter than the 35 axle that these things came off of. And what that means is that this, the bracket for the rear radius rod, does not sit down nicely. As you see, there is a very large gap there. it does not sit down nicely close to the axle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this off, and I'm going to move it this way, and I'm going to weld it back on, about 1/4 inch, probably about 1/4 inch. So we'll see how that works out. Maybe 1/4, maybe 3/8. But yeah, we'll see how it works out. I'll probably end up reinforcing the tube itself, because this is all on the forged axle end, and this is a tube. So I may end up reinforcing it depending on how it goes. I may just reinforce it just because. So yeah, that's unexpected project for the day. So I went ahead and flipped that bracket around, and this is what we got now. As you can see, there is 0 gap there, and there is just a little bit of gap right there. And this is actually going to sit right about here once it's all said and done. So this is definitely a win. Our mark is right there. That's where the bracket, well, that's the center line, I guess, the center line spot for both sides. And this is going to sit right, the inner side of the bracket needs to sit there. So that's going to sit right there, just like so. And 1/4 inch is pretty much perfect. So this project has led to many additional projects. One of them being getting a welder up and running for welding of miscellaneous things, right? So I got a bunch of parts for my little TIG unit. So I'm going to get those out of the box and get that whole thing set up. This is my box of parts. So we went to, I had this little Miller CST 280, and unfortunately I didn't have anything to go along with it as far as leads, ground leads, etc., etc. So I went to Airgas and I picked up a bunch of stuff for it. And I'm going to put all that stuff together and to hopefully have a welder that works once I'm done. All right, so I ran into a problem. I went to the welding shop, and they told me that this DINS connector was the right one for my machine. And I was skeptical because it didn't look like it was the right one. And sure enough, now I have tested it. And that is entirely too loose for what I've got. Unfortunately, it's Sunday and there's no weld shops open, so I guess we're gonna have to do it the old-fashioned way. So we're gonna do it without a TIG. We're gonna do it with gas or MIG. We'll check it out with MIG first and see how it works, and we may revert to using gas. So